Continuing this special program on villains, the characters you love to hate, study the villains in a nation's movies and you can draw a pretty good graph of its political opinions. The bad guy of one decade turns into the good guy of the next, and often the selections have a lot to do with racism or nationalism or trends in political allies. For example, Indians used to be villains. In John Ford's The Searchers, they were kidnapping savages. But in Dances with Wolves, the U.S. cavalry was in the wrong, and the Indians were living in harmony with nature.
Spirits are high, and overnight I have gone from a person of suspicion to one of genuine standing. I am greeted with open smiles and looks of appreciation.
In war movies, enemies are always good villains. The Japanese were brutal to POWs in The Bridge on the River Kwai.
You speak to me of code? What code? A coward code.
But in Come See the Paradise in 1990, Japanese Americans were victims of racist U.S. internment camps.
Right over there, that's it.
During the Vietnam War, the enemy was portrayed in stark terms in movies like The Deer Hunter, where they ran a brutal prison camp. Now revisionism is going on here, too, as movies like Oliver Stone's Heaven and Earth identify with Vietnamese who are the victims of both sides. After the Indians, the Russians are the longest-running villains in American movies, providing spies, saboteurs, and obstructive diplomats like those up against Sean Connery's James Bond in From Russia with Love.
Excuse me, you did say your clock was correct.
Russian clocks are always correct.
But with the thaw in the Cold War, we got Sean Connery himself now as a peace-seeking Russian submarine captain in The Hunt for Red October.
I present you the ballistic missile submarine Red October. My officers and I request asylum in the United States of America.
These days, Hollywood has only a few small groups left who can still provide reliable villains. And there's another more subtle problem. Action pictures, which use the most villains, make more than half of their money overseas. So Hollywood needs good international villains, not just those that are only hated by domestic audiences.
Well, to be charitable to political correctness on villains, we're going through a phase.
Yeah.
And the ultimate goal is to be more decent and more particular in who we pick for being evil. So that's healthy. But it did get comical in this decade, and that is when we had in D2, I know you'll remember this, who was the bad hockey team? Where were they from? Iceland.
Iceland, right. The Mighty Ducks up against those evil hockey players
They're
from
on that
Iceland.
little island, and all they do is think of evil
Yeah, but
things.
they're safe villains because who cares if they hurt the box office in Reykjavik?
You got it. Okay. So much for who can't be a villain anymore. What about villains who seem eternal? Clearly, Nazis fit the bill, and the proof of it is I feel kind of funny talking about Nazis in anything remotely related to the world of entertainment, even here on this show. We're talking about pure evil here. In the decade following World War II, for example, Otto Preminger gave a memorable performance as a Nazi camp commandant in Stalag 17.
Nobody has ever escaped from Stalag 17. Not alive, anyway.
And Stanley Kramer's Judgment at Nuremberg from 1961 even had a Nazi officer, Burt Lancaster, turn on his own kind.
Emil Hahn. The decayed, corrupt bigot, obsessed by the evil within himself.
Of course, in the most heralded film in recent years, Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List, a Nazi commandant is shown shooting Jews for target practice while the same day being infatuated with a Jewish prisoner.
Is this the face of a rat? Are these the eyes of a rat?
Arab assassins and terrorists have been credible villains for decades, going back to Alfred Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much from 1956.
Hey, look there.
And as long as Arab terrorists bomb international airplanes and New York City skyscrapers, pictures like True Lies won't think twice about portraying a Middle Eastern menace.
Do you know why you've been brought here? So that this man can verify to the world the Crimson Jihad is now a nuclear power.
Another staple, the political assassin. He's been with us a long time and never better portrayed than in The Manchurian Candidate, which was released 1 year before President Kennedy's murder. Following the Kennedy assassination, fame-seeking creeps pop up every year in the movies, sometimes in films of quality like Taxi Driver. Another great assassin, John Malkovich in The Line of Fire. What about generic bad guys of no specific nationality? In the James Bond films, villains like Klaus Maria Brandauer in Never Say Never Again want to control nothing less than the world entire.
Begin. Thank you, gentlemen. The eternal battle for the domination of the world begins. We play for dollars. Random target selection, Spain.
Actually, a lot of villains today are not interested in controlling the world. More typically today, we're getting a more modest goal. Money. Lots of it. Villains don't want to control others anymore. They don't like other people. They don't want to be around them. They just want what the big guys have. Lots of dough.
Maybe this reflects kind of the mirror image of what society wants.
Yes.
In the 60s and 70s, things were more idealistic. People wanted to change the world, so villains wanted to run the world.
Okay.
Today, people want to make lots of money, so villains want to make even more money.
You got it.
It may be very simple.
Villains tell us a lot about ourselves.
Yes,
When we
they do.
come back, what makes a good villain and why?